All right, everybody, we're going to get started with our last panel for the day. So if you could find your seats, that'd be great. Thanks to everyone who has joined us, and especially those who've stayed with us all day. Lots of good discussions. So for our final panel today, I'm really excited to be joined by three experts. And we're going to be talking about signature wounds of war and kind of what does the path forward look like in regards to healthcare, moving us from service members to veterans and beyond. So with me today, I've got Shane Liermann. He, as you heard earlier, is the Deputy National Director, Deputy National Legislative Director. Whew, a mouthful. For DAV. He's a service-disabled Marine veteran. He's had many roles at DAV over the course of years, but he's an expert on toxic exposures, so much so that the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims had him as an expert on their toxic exposures panel during one of their judicial conferences. So we're excited to have Shane. We also have Thor Wald, who is the Deputy Director for Veterans and Military Engagement here at Cerner. He spent some good time at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Well, I mean, I guess I should let you decide whether it was a good time or not, but he spent some time at the Department of Veterans Affairs as a legislative specialist and several other positions focusing on healthcare. He spent 8 years as a Navy corpsman with 2 combat tours with U.S. Marine infantry units, and he is a Purple Heart recipient. And then on the screen, to your right, I believe, is Dan Clare, who is the Chief Communications and Outreach Officer at DAV. He is a Marine veteran, a journalist. He's been many times awarded for his journalistic chops. He's a Marine veteran, but also was in the Air National Guard. And he was one of the first and main voices on the hazards of burn pits, which, as we all know, is very relevant and timely to discuss. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Let's dive right in. So we're going to start with talk about a little bit about what in your military service kind of carries through for you as you do the work that you're currently doing. So why don't we start with Thor?
Hi, everybody. So, as Betty said, I was a Navy corpsman, and the thing that really carried through the work I'm doing now, especially, and the reason I came to Cerner was, I have this very vivid memory in my leaving my deployment in 2005, which was, had a lot of kinetic action. Coming back from that deployment where a lot of guys got hurt, the only record that they had was pieces of paper that someone hopefully wrote something down at some point between when they got hit. Because, hey, I don't exactly carry around paper and a pen when I'm out with the unit, right? And then even at the battalion aid station, when they go back to the second echelon, hopefully someone's got time to write something down. But, when you've got a bunch of guys that are coming in, you don't really have time to do that either. But what medical records we had, even from the non-emergency stuff, which becomes really important later as I found out for benefits and such, it was manila folders stuffed with paper that they're like, here you go, doc. And I threw it in my backpack. And that was it, for my whole company. If I dropped my backpack or if something happened to it or someone spilled something on it or whatever between our forward base in Iraq and then to the battalion base to muster up and then to Al Assad Air Base and then to Ali Al Saleen and then to Bangor, Maine and then back to my duty station and then to the parent unit, if anything happened to that backpack, that was it. That was the only record that anything could happen to these guys in Iraq. And then, fast forward a few years, I'm at the VA and I'm seeing all these issues with guys getting, and I say guys because, I was with the Marines. These guys are calling me hey, doc, they can't find records of what happened to me. Can you write a statement? Because, you were the guy who duct taped my fingers back together when, something happened, or you were the guy who treated me they don't have a record of it. I'm trying to get my benefits and I can't because I don't have this letter. And they can't find this record. So that through line. I had a guy email me literally yesterday saying, "Hey doc, my records got hosed somewhere along the way. Can you please write me a letter to talk about the back issues that I had in service because they can't find any record of it anywhere else?" And I mean, stuff like that. When I found out what Cerner was doing with the electronic health record, that would literally solve that issue. I was like, that's where I want to work. It was my first private gig. I was at the VA for 10 years, and I was kind of looking around for what the next big rock I wanted to move was. And I'm like, that's a project I want to work on. That's what I want to do, because I personally know too many guys where that has become such an issue for them 20 years later, trying to get benefits, trying to get education services, trying to get their voc rehab, trying to get all the things. And, Shane can speak to that as well as a service officer, even better than I can, the troubles and, how much time and effort is spent trying to track down this stuff. That if, going forward now, there are guys who are setting foot on the footprints at MCRD San Diego right now who will have a medical record until the day they die. That is one record. That is through all their military time, all their VA time, their private doctor, the whole 9 yards. And this literally will not be an issue for them at all. It just won't exist. So that's really the profound reason I came here. And I know Shane can speak on the benefit side of that more too.
Yeah, Shane, obviously your time as a service officer played into your now area of expertise, but talk a little bit about what else drives you to focus on toxic exposure specifically.
Well, I think part of it is I was medically discharged from the United States Marine Corps. There it is. Had to wait for it.
Raw.
And the crazy thing is, they still to this day haven't found my original medical record. Not my medical separation, not my disability, nothing. I made a copy before I got out. So it was a little more complicated, but I was still able to get benefits. To Thor's point, that really creates a lot of problems. They still haven't found my original records. Thank God I had the foresight to make a copy because my gunny sergeant told me to. Who doesn't listen to the gunny, right? So I'm glad I did that. But really for me, the reason I got involved is I was out for over 2 years and never knew I could file a disability for being medically discharged, right? They didn't have TAPs back then. It was you just walked out the door and maybe you would figure it out. So I was fortunate enough to stumble into DAV in Cheyenne, Wyoming. They helped me out and I was able to get my disability claim. And then a doc said, you need to find a new job. Your disabilities are getting worse. Went back to them. Hey, I want to learn about voc rehab. They're like, have you ever thought of doing this? I'm like, I really don't understand what you do. All I know is you helped me when I asked for it. And I, hey, grab a seat. 24 years later, here I am. And one of the things we worked on the most, and to the toxic exposures question, is when you're helping a veteran who was exposed to Agent Orange, try to get a disability that's not on the presumptive list. It's complicated. Trying to get benefits for a survivor for a veteran exposed to radiation exposure. And the VA continues to say no because you didn't meet the dose estimate requirements. To help a veteran get a condition related to burn pits. By the way, VA denies 78% of them. So that is really why I got so involved in the toxic exposure spaces, because I don't want to see that anymore. Veterans should not have to struggle to prove their exposure, that we were put in harm's way, whether it was intentional or not. It's not the point. The point is, if they made us sick, if they made us ill, if we got an injury, it shouldn't be that goddamn hard. It just shouldn't. And so that's why I've really got involved in this, is because too many years and too many experiences of Agent Orange related, radiation related, Persian Gulf illnesses, undiagnosed illnesses. And that's what's been driving me ever since on the toxic exposure issue.
Thank you. And Dan, so with your background in journalism and communications, can you talk a little bit about how your role has played into sort of how we've gotten to this point in terms of policy related to healthcare for service members and veterans?
It's funny, we're all kind of talking about paperwork right now, and because it is that important. For me, I I was actually working for DAV when I was activated in the Guard and sent to Iraq. You didn't have to be on the ground very long if you're around an active burn pit like we had at Balad to know that this is not good for your health. This is something something that you're breathing that's just terrible. It was like one of those smells if you ran a really powerful cleaner in your house. It just, sometimes you can get used to something after a while, and I don't think I ever quite got used to burn pits. As a journalist, it was just kind of one of those weird things. I was, just doing my job. And at one point, part of being a journalist for the military is you're on the other side of it too, dealing with media relations. And so I was actually on the crisis communications team for burn pits. And I remember thinking, this is an odd place for someone who works as a communicator full-time for disabled American veterans to be. I don't think that I was out of the meeting where I first saw Darren Curtis's memo on burn pits. I hadn't been out of the meeting for 10 minutes, and I was making a copy of that memo to send back to DAV when my boss came up to me and said, "Well, what's up?" And I said, "I'm just making some copies." And so anyway, that news, I knew that when I saw that memo that it was going to be important to a lot of people's health records. And just when you dig in just a little bit at the time, you knew there was the potential for this to be a really big deal for a lot of people. And it was one of many of the types of issues that people faced on a grand scale since we started the wars after 9/11.
It's the kind of signature wound of war for these past 20 years. I was going to start with Dan and ask, what are the signature wounds of war for these past 20 years that now we take and work into the future?
Yeah, I didn't catch that. I think burn pits are definitely a part of the conversation. And that's something that Shane's been working hard on, is getting the studies. I mean, that we already have presumptives for burn pits is a pretty remarkable thing for veterans. And that speaks to generations of people who have gone through similar things with Agent Orange. Traumatic brain injuries are, of course, a major issue that everyone's going to be talking about. And we've even seen in the last 20 years, it's remarkable to if you know people who've been injured that way, to see how things have evolved and changed. And of course, PTSD's tied in with all of that as well, and mental health concerns. But certainly when you have people who are serving in multiple wars and being exposed with really great combat gear, really great protective gear, it's saving a lot of lives. But the quality of life for people who get saved is really dependent on the treatment that they get and how well we take care of them when they get home.
Yeah, and apologies, we're having a little bit of sound issues, so I know it might be a little difficult to hear Dan, but we'll keep working on it. Shane, Thor, how about you? Can you talk a little bit about TBI specifically and kind of what the impacts have been there? We can start with you, Shane.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. The impact that the disability TBI has had on the VA is actually quite immense. Representing veterans for 24 years before 9/11 is when I first started. So when TBIs first were starting to be diagnosed and it started becoming an issue, veterans started filing claims for them in 2002, 2003, 2004. VA realized they had a problem. Did you know the diagnostic code at that time for a head injury consistent with a TBI was a 10% rating for a concussion syndrome? That was it, 10% rating. We now know that the severity of TBIs affect 3 different parts, right? VA updated their rating schedule criteria in 2008. That's how big of a deal this was. That's how many TBIs there were, how many veterans were suffering with it. It actually caused VA to change their diagnostic code rating criteria. If anybody's been in this business very long, that doesn't happen very damn often. And not only did they change it, they changed it for the better. right? Which isn't always something else we see. So it went from just a 10% for a concussive disorder to rating on 3 different things: cognitive dysfunction, and then it went to emotional or psychological conditions caused by it, and then the physical element. So a veteran can now be rated on 3 different sets of conditions caused by a TBI, which prior to 2008 didn't exist. So the ratings are better. Veterans are being compensated at higher rates, which in turn makes them more eligible for other benefits. In 2013, they changed the rating, they changed one of the regulations to where now they automatically recognize a long list of conditions secondary to a TBI. The only other ones that existed in the regulations before that was ischemic heart disease for a veteran with an above-the-knee amputation. So it took a very long time for these changes, but VA has moved the needle because of the severity of them, how often they were happening, and the severity of the conditions veterans are having. What we also noticed at that time, too, is just because a TBI isn't noted in your records, right, that's sometimes a bad thing. VA recently said that between 2000 and 2017, there were over 375,000 TBIs diagnosed on active duty. 375,000. That's huge. How many weren't diagnosed on active duty? How many veterans weren't able to get their benefits based on not having it diagnosed in their records or having a comparable accident in their records? There's a regulation that says if a veteran was in combat, if you were a combat veteran, anything that you say about your service, as long as it's consistent with that service, happened. VA was denying those claims. Veteran had a Purple Heart, that proves he was in combat. You were in Iraq, you were on a convoy, chances are you had an experience with an IED, right? VA was denying the claim for the TBI because there's no evidence that your convoy hit an IED. They were failing to miss the point. If a combat veteran said so, they had to take it. It's in the changes of TBI evaluations and the frequency of it has dramatically changed over the last 20 years, and it's quite amazing, actually. I don't think we've seen that with any other disability in my 24 years of doing this.
Yeah, I came to the VA in 2005, and for sure, we were not talking about TBI a lot then. So it is remarkable. Thor, anything to add about the impacts?
Yeah, so TBI is one of those things where, yes, it's one of the signature injuries for this war, but it's obviously not new. Before this, it was all kinds of different things. Shell shock. It was, soldier's heart, where we still to this day have a hard time differentiating the symptomology of TBI from PTSD and so forth. But what really changed in this conflict was the survivability, right? Our medevac systems had a quantum leap in effectiveness in this conflict. So that coupled with our body armor, coupled with, tactics and Navy medicine, everything else, people were surviving what they didn't used to survive. And because of that, you have, well, what are the lingering issues now? It didn't during the Vietnam conflict, 76% of the people that died from bleeding out. Well, now you're not dying from bleeding out because we had things like hemostatic dressings. So, okay, well, you get hit, mortar hit that normally would have killed someone. Now they're surviving. Well, now they've got all these people who survive, but the residual injury is that TBI. And what we were starting to find was it's not just the big TBIs. Like you ran over an anti-tank mine and your helmet got cracked in half because you got slammed up against the wall of the Amtrak. Yes, those are the big obvious ones. But we started to find, especially once we stood up NICO, the National Intrepid Center for Excellence for PTSD and TBI out at Walter Reed Bethesda, that Lee Becker helped start, by the way. He didn't say that, but he was up when he was up here. What we started to find was we were working with sports medicine people, and it's the mild to moderate TBIs, the stuff that you don't get sent back to the rear for. Maybe you fell off a zip line or you fell out of the 7-ton and smacked your head, and you're dizzy for a second, you kind of shake it off and you leave. But there's an effect that is greater than the addition of those minor ones. 3 to 4 minor to moderate TBIs can be as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than one big TBI. We weren't tracking those, right? We had no mechanism to, because battlefield medicine hadn't yet, our record keeping, especially going back to record keeping, our record keeping and our diagnostic equipment hadn't yet caught up to the way that we can medevac people. So a mortar goes off, everyone kind of gets knocked down, everybody gets back up. You continue on the patrol. I had, as a Navy corpsman, I had no way to test neurocognitive function at that level. The only way to do it would be to turn the whole patrol around, take everybody back to the aid station, and maybe do like a paper ANAM exam. So 30 minutes to an hour and a half later doesn't help me. Now you couple that with the fact that we didn't baseline anyone coming into the military. So maybe, if you're someone who played football or hockey and you had all these, mild to moderate TBIs through your elementary, middle, high school years, and then you go into the military and then you deploy and then you get another TBI versus someone who maybe never had anything wrong with them, no TBIs, and then they have a TBI. We started seeing all these radically different effects, but then we realized, oh my God, we're not baselining anyone when they come in, so we have no idea what the cumulative effects of these things are. So because of that, TBIs really became a focus on the DoD side as well as the VA side, and we started doing things like using the MACE exam to baseline people as they came in, so we had a baseline expectation. BUMED worked on a project called DANA, which was a defense automated neurological assessment tool. It's basically a hardened little iPad thing where I could battlefield medics could test people for their neurocognitive function on the battlefield, right at echelon 1. So yeah, the TBI treatment is still evolving today. We're still finding out new things. This is brain science.
I was going to say the brain is not a simple organ, as we know. Yeah.
No, we're finding out new things on the DoD medical side, and as that research is informed, the DoD is, it's hard trying to keep up with that because, as I'm sure Shane can give tons of examples, this is a system design if you were in World War I and going back to a factory or a farm. They weren't really looking at things like what's your ability to work on a computer every day? What's your ability to look at small print? What's your ability to type? What's your very fine motor dexterous skills? So I think they're doing a good job, but there's so much to be done because we're still learning things every single day about how the long-term effects of TBIs are affecting our veterans. Yeah,
and there are great points that you made, Thor, about baselining and also the fact that it isn't always just the one impact, not just the one incident. So I want to come back to Dan, and I want to talk about burn pits and toxic exposures now. So you were one of the first to really sound the alarm on this issue. Can you talk to us a little bit about, why it's so important and kind of where you see the conversation going from here?
I think it's important because this could be like our generation's Agent Orange. This could be something there. It was so widespread. When you're in Iraq and you set up for a war, everyone's in an expeditionary environment. And in an expeditionary environment, you can't turn over uniforms. You can't turn over your waste to the enemy, or the enemy is going to use it to try and blow you up. So it made sense to burn things. But as Balad became Balad Anaconda, Camp Anaconda, and things kept getting bigger and bigger, and it became like a large city, but there weren't incinerators, so we were burning everything. And it wasn't a case where commanders didn't want to. The commanders wanted a safe base. They didn't want to be the person who was in charge of a wing or a brigade or whatever, where a bunch of people are getting sick and losing when they're performing great on the battlefield otherwise. So it was kind of somewhat unavoidable. There was some bureaucracy, and I think we addressed that later, but it was too late for a lot of people who just had to suffer through all that burning. I had a 5-day Balad Outlook calendar where every day of the week, the morning forecast was smoke and fog, which is something you don't usually see, on a civilian 7-day forecast. And so it was it was a terrible, awful thing that was going on over there. But then we've already seen where it's affected people back home. And Shane can talk about this more, but we don't know to what extent this has affected people or what extent it will affect people. We're fighting right now just to make it equitable for the people with immediate concerns, but they're just like with traumatic brain injuries. There's long-term implications that we need to be on the lookout for, and we need to keep looking after that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Shane, to that point, for something as big and longstanding and heavy as burn pits and toxic exposures, can you talk a little bit about how you attack that from a policy standpoint? How do you start to move the needle on these issues?
Well, that's a great question, because where do you start? Do we know what everybody was exposed to? No, we don't. Do we know when and where everybody was exposed to? No, we don't. Do we know if they have any long-term effects? No, because nobody studied it. So to your point, what do? So when we started thinking about this, we worked with Senator Sullivan and Senator Manchin to devise the Veterans Burn Pit Recognition Exposure Act. It's in the Senate and the House. We tried to think about this from the point of view of, okay, what they do in Vietnam. In Vietnam, if you were there, you were exposed, period, right? Conceding the exposure. Why can't we do that with burn pits? Why can't we just say, if you were in a country with burn pits, chances are you were at a base with burn pits, so you were exposed, period. Let's just get that out of the way. The next part is, as Dan was mentioning, Wold was a big part of this puzzle. They did some air sampling tests in 2007 and 2008, and they found, I want to say it was over 40 different toxins and chemicals in the burn pit, just at that location. Well, what about Djibouti? What about Afghanistan? What about all these other places? Do we know what was actually in there? Do we know what chemicals were toxins? No, we don't, because not every base was burning the same thing. So then it became, okay, let's figure out what's in there. So then we came up with, let's use the same chemicals that Wold air sampling found, because guess what? VA even recognizes that, right? Let's just use what they're already recognizing, which they're not telling you. If you file a claim for burn pits right now, VA doesn't send you the list of the toxins they concede you were exposed to. They don't. Why is that? I don't know either. So that's why we included that as a part of the legislation, because no, let's put it in there, because you should know, because if you want to get a medical opinion from a doctor, if your cancer is related to that toxic exposure, but you can't give them a list of the things you were exposed to, you're kind of dumb before you start, right? So that's the thinking, and that's where we started looking at how can we do that. Now, there are several other bills pending right now in the Senate and the House. There's the TMAC, which also covers a lot of different issues about exposures, as well as automatic health care for veterans exposed to toxins during that time. So there's a lot of action going on trying to find a way to get it done. And one of the big reasons, too, healthcare, and the TEAM Act addresses providing healthcare. And the second part is getting it service connected. We all know service connection is kind of where all our benefits start, right? That's the catalyst to everything else. VA is denying 77 point some odd % of all claims for burn pits. It's kind of a high denial rate. That's what kind of kicked all of this off. Why is there such a high denial rate on these claims? Let's find an easier way. So there is tons of bills out there right now. I'll plug two real quick that has a lot of these types of things in there. One is the Cost of War Act. It's currently in the Senate. It would cover a lot of the provisions from the TEAM Act. It would cover a lot of provisions from the Veterans Burn Pit Exposure Recognition Act. And then there's a bill in the House right now called Honoring Our Pact Act, and that would cover a lot of these too. They're very large omnibus bills. There's a lot of momentum on this issue right now. We're feeling very confident. We did up until about May, when they passed, each committee in the House and the Senate for the Veterans Affairs passed them, and then nothing. We're waiting for scoring from the Congressional Budget Office, but we're still trying to get it pushed forward, because I'm very optimistic. I really feel like this has a chance, maybe not this year, but 117th Congress goes through next year. I think we got a chance of getting something done in this Congress. I really do.
Well, and certainly lots of folks in this room are also working on this issue, and there's a lot of gratitude for that. I want to pick it back to Dan real quick and then come back to Thor. Dan, so for these policy changes that Shane is describing and that DAV and other VSOs are working on, how does your communications and outreach strategy help them along? How do the two play nice together in Sandbox?
Well, I mean, they're completely tied. I mean, the way that we work together, our deputy communications director really wears two hats, and part of that, a big chunk of that is policy for her. Yeah, making the public aware of this, John Stewart's done us a lot of great favors. But I mean, and going back, I would just say that was one of the key components from the very start. I was, and Shane and I are both, I think, very grateful to be inheritors of a great legacy of DAV people who have been through these fights before. It's like Shane and the team are dusting off a playbook from Agent Orange and trying to look at the mistakes of the past and address them now. But one of the first things that we did was team up with Kelly Kennedy and Military Times and make this as big a story as we could possibly get. Kelly got a nice award from DAV for doing that. And we just have to stay on the throttle because we can't play the short game here because we have no idea what the long game looks like, except that it potentially could be very bad. Yeah.
Thank you. If you've got questions, you can get ready to raise your hand, but I'm gonna give it to Thor to kind of briefly wrap us up. You don't have to go into like all the nitty-gritty details because obviously people can request a demo if they really want those. But what parts of this, are closest in your mind and in your heart as you're working here at Cerner on, moving electronic healthcare record modernization?
So, one of the things I think about, like listening to Shane and being at VA when we went through NEMR for the Agent Orange stuff, was the fact that we're always looking in the rearview mirror to try to cherry pick and figure out what we're trying to piece it together in retrospect, right? Whereas the next thing, because there will be a next thing, whatever the next thing is, I mean, we're currently, REHR is in every DoD facility command west of the Mississippi, except for I think a few in Texas maybe, but they're coming up next. And the whole west coast of the Coast Guard. So in a few years, when we're on all 7 continents for DoD and we're fielded all over in VA, you'll start seeing patterns emerge without having to wait for the after effects, right? So instead of waiting for guys who start getting cancer, I had 3 guys in my company who had serious cancers. Like that is a startling incident rate in that small of a cohort. Instead of waiting for that, you can start identifying, hey, all these little things, because, burn pits and the same thing with the Agent Orange exposure, it's not a diagnosis itself necessarily, it's a clustering of symptomologies, right? You can have asthma without being next to a burn pit. You can have A, B, C, D, and E. It's the combination of A, B, C, D, E, and F together that give you burn pit, that give you Agent Orange. So instead of having to wait till 20 years later when people are getting sick and then flipping back to the records and hopefully someone has an aha moment, we'll start seeing those patterns emerge. The law of large data will tell us that patterns will start emerging when we have all this data together. And, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because we're already doing this. This is already happening. So the next, in a couple of years, we'll start seeing that data emerge, and we won't have to wait for people to get sick, and we'll be able to get ahead of the ball instead of trying to play catch up like we are now.
Advanced trend identification.
Data science.
Yeah, great. Yeah, data
science.
All right. Well, we're going to open it up for questions. So raise your hand if you have one, and we'll get a mic to you. Oh, all right. Oh, that's right. We lost a mic earlier. Sorry.
Mic. Sorry, guys.
Yep.
Hey, good evening, guys. First of all, thank you for what you're doing here. And my name is Ben, and I wanted to talk a little bit about MHS Genesis. Is there anything that you can expand upon from transitioning service members to the VA and how MHS Genesis is going to help with the electronic health records and transparency for the veterans?
I'll take it. you want to. Okay. So MHS Genesis and the VA, which is Cerner Millennium, it's the same system. The way I try to describe it to people is this isn't like a layout. This isn't like an overlay of systems. It's if your DoD record and system is A and your current VA record is B, this is C. It's a product that is just one whole record for everything. So in so much as how it's going to help with your transition, like I said, there's people over in Camp Pendleton right now who have this and will have this when they get out. So, when it comes time, not everybody goes the day they get out. We hope they do. Not everybody goes and files their claim the day they get out. Some of these guys wait 10, 15, 20 years until they get sick or they need it or someone convinces them to. I've got Marines now who I still can't convince to go in and get their benefits. Like, bro, please, come on. I was there. I literally carried your leg that was over there back. You can get benefits for this, bro. Instead of having to go back and get Nexus opinions filed and, try to play a game where you're looking for records and looking for a piece of paper and getting lay statements and getting buddy statements, everything else, it'll just be there. They won't have to do a records call and hope that it didn't burn in a fire at NARA. It'll just be there. The VA will just open your record and see that military record as it was typed by whomever put that in their record 10, 15 years ago. And it's going to radically improve not just benefits, but we start talking about social determinants of health and the psychosocial and socioeconomic factors that tie into it. All that stuff's going to be in one big data lake now. So we're going to be able to get ahead of the curve on things like voc rehab, on things like joblessness, homelessness, mental health, all that stuff, because we know there's comorbidities between those different things. So we'll be able to see that ahead of time, and we'll become a proactive system instead of being a reactive system like we are now. I'll let Shane talk about it some from the the benefit side, how to help these guys out.
Well, real quick, it really will have an impact. For example, if we know what 40 different veterans who were exposed to burn pits end up having over their lifetime, that's good data. That's stuff we need. That'll help us try to figure out what is related. Now, there is a program called EILERS. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with that, individual longitudinal exposure record. It's a DoD project, and VA now has access to it, to where they can determine what you were exposed to as far as certain toxins through your service. Now, it's not retrospective, so they're not going to go back 10, 20, 40, 50, 60 years, but it's going to go from now forward. The importance of that is you'll be able to help determine if you were exposed to something that might align with some of the symptoms and other conditions you have. Downside to it is you're never going to know exactly what you were exposed to. Neither is DoD, right? So EILERS is a good start going forward, but the only way we're ever really going to know what and when you were exposed and have record is if we tag everybody, right? Tag you all, put a monitor on whenever you go out, put a tracking system so we know exactly where you were and what you were exposed to at that time. I am not a defense policy expert, but I'm kind of thinking that's a no-go, putting a tracking device on everybody. But there's ways we can do it, and being able to track these records from start to finish is a huge part of it, because if we want to know what the long-term effects of Agent Orange is or burn pits, we need to know that for the next 30 years, not just the last 5. We need to know what is that long-term impact. So the more data we have, the better chances we have at increasing the healthcare outcomes as well as access to benefits.
Any other questions for our panelists? And I will note that they will both be available momentarily at the reception should you want to corner them and ask your questions rather than do it here.
Just one last comment I wanted to make, I forgot, in reference to burn pits toxic exposures. On August 5th, VA Secretary announced that we're going to add 3 presumptive diseases for exposure to particulate matter. Now, burn pits, particulate matter. Everybody says with their burn pit presumptions, the regulation doesn't say it's burn pits. Regulation says it's particulate matter, which is an airborne hazard. Now, they did add 3 presumptives, and that is sinusitis, rhinitis, and asthma. It's a great start. This is the first time VA has recognized conditions to burn pit exposure. Took us 20 years, right? But we're getting there, and hopefully we'll keep moving. They announced at one of the hearings earlier this year they're doing a 180-day review within VA to determine the process that they're going to put in place for looking at presumptives, additional, new, different exposures. So that's going to come out real soon. Hopefully that'll give us some more insight. But my advice is, if you have one of those 3 conditions I just talked about, and you were over there, file your claim. Don't wait. Don't wait. Don't be like Thor's friend that has waited 20 years to file a claim, and we all have those. And make sure you're taking care of yourself now, because I think most of us have realized at this point, once you left service, they didn't assign somebody to help take care of you once you left, right? Track down your records. And I know the Marine Corps was good to me, but they didn't give somebody to help me plan my day and find records and get health care. So take care of yourselves, because this really is on us at this point.
Very excellent advice to close on. I want to thank Dan, Shane, and Thor for sharing their insights with us, and with the exception of Dan, who had to join us virtually today. Like I said, you can chat with these gentlemen in just a few minutes. So we are not going to take a break just yet. We've got a little bit more. We may or may not have a surprise guest for you. So I'm going to pass the microphone right now to Justin Brown, who is the founder of HillVets.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you, Shane. And where should I sit here? Right. That looks pretty good. Good evening. My name is Justin Brown. I'm the founder of HillVets, and really appreciate y'all being here today. I know it's been a long day, so find some energy. The bar is nigh. You know, we're not too far off, a few minutes away. Speaking of bars, I kind of started HillVets in a bar, and if you would have told me 8 years ago, as I'm sitting there with my buddies who are at the VA, at the VFW, the American Legion, the DAV, really we just invited everyone and said, hey, you know, we don't really get together. Let's all get together and have a good time. But at that time, if you would have said, Justin, 8 years from now, you're going to be sitting on the 22nd floor of this amazing high-rise building. HillVets is going to have a house that houses fellows. You're going to the community is going to have a leadership program. I don't think I would have believed you. You know, I think a lot of people think that there was that level of vision from me and the folks who were involved in this, and there really wasn't. We just kind of started going, and then we started asking the question of how can we provide value to our community of veterans who want to come to Washington, D.C., who want to be engaged, who want to continue serving their nation in a meaningful way. And so I'm really, really proud of all of our proteges and our fellows, all of you, and our supporters who've taken the time to be here today, to, you know, listen to these amazing panelists that our proteges put together. And also thanks to all of our alum who are in the building, you know, who are showing up, continuing to do amazing things. And how about a round of applause for Betty Rhoades? I guess I should sit. My head's cut off. Great job, Betty. Thank you for everything you continue to do for the HillVets mission. I'm honored to introduce, I'll do a quick introduction because he hates long introductions. I know him for that. But this individual was one of the first people who I approached, highlighting that our veterans really needed help building a community here in our nation's capital. And he was that level of person that it was like, you're scared. I don't know any better way to say it other than, you're anxious, you're nervous, and you're hopeful that they believe in your vision and they believe in what it is you're trying to accomplish. And this person, I think, really understood what we were trying to do. He'd lived a similar story to myself in coming to Washington, D.C., and having a tough time finding housing, a tough time, networking and all of those things. But he has been with us for a number of years. We're proud to have him as part of our organization, as the chair of our advisory board. He is the 24th Secretary of Defense, and he is a Army Sergeant. And Secretary Hagel, I'll go ahead and I'll stop there. And we appreciate you, sir. The floor is.
Justin, thank you. Am I all hooked up? Can you hear me? You can hear me. Good. Thank you very much for the introduction, Justin, and thank you for what you've done for this organization. Your imagination, your leadership, what you believed at the beginning, and it's turned the right way because you have stayed at it and you've been relentless. So I congratulate you. To Betty, all the HillVets people, thank you for your great work that you continue to do. And congratulations to the HillVets 6 CAPCON group who have completed the course. I met a number of you earlier this year. Sorry, I'm not there in person. And I heard what Justin said about the bar is not very far away, and you've been up there all day. So I'm not going to take a lot of your time other than to again say thank you. Thank you all, and especially to the DAV and Cerner for their sponsorship and for their steadfast support of HillVets and what HillVets does and what HillVets means to so many. I don't think it's any secret that this country's in some trouble today. We are as polarized and divided as I believe we've been ever in my lifetime. I was born 9 months after my dad came back from World War II. And so I've been around 75 years since World War II. And I don't know of a time that's been more volatile, more hostile, more divided, more unpredictable. And that means here in this country, which is very dangerous to our future. Our veterans can offer so much. You all have been through so much. You've seen so much. You've been tested. Your feet are on the ground. You care about the country. You imbue all the right qualities of citizenship, and I think what's really most spectacular about this country. So your leadership is invaluable, and to have more and more of you get into government as you will move up the chain, and you'll be in a position of responsibility, and you'll be in a position of senior decision making. So I think to have this effort ongoing as we expand the horizons of HillVets and help place all of you who are so smart, so good, so experienced in these jobs is the right thing to do for our country. And our country will benefit from that. You'll benefit from it. Your families will benefit from it. I was in Omaha, and I'll end with this. I was in Omaha last week for a week, working with the University of Nebraska at Omaha. It has my archives, working with Stratcom, a lot of the top secret projects that University of Nebraska Omaha does with the Pentagon and Stratcom. But I was there mainly for the 5th annual University of Nebraska at Omaha Chuck Hagel Public Service Symposium. This symposium is held for seniors in high school who are getting out, not sure what they want to do with themselves, with their life, where they want to go. And I've always felt that public service gets underplayed by too many people in this country. We take for granted public service. The quality of the people that are in public service is really astounding. Certainly the military, I think, is at the top of that. But you go across the government at every level, every administration, every department, and I would include state government, I'd include local government. And I just wanted young people to think about public service as a career option. I don't know if there's anything that would be more fulfilling. Certainly it has been in all the jobs I've had in public service. I've been privileged to have those jobs. I've been lucky in many ways. Many people have helped me. So to all of you, again, I say congratulations. Keep going. You mean a lot to this country. You mean a lot to your families, your friends, your community, and you'll do big things. And I'm just privilege that I have had a little bit to do with HillVets, and I want to continue to do what I can and not get in Justin's way or Betty's way or anybody else, but where I can help and when they think I can help, I want to do it. So all of you, thank you. The DAV and Cerner, thank you for what you always do. With that, Justin, as far as I'm concerned, go have a drink.
Well, we greatly appreciate you, sir, and thank you for taking the time. And we certainly look forward to seeing you at the HillVets 100 in March. And, hopefully we finally get to have that event that we've now missed twice because of COVID. But, you would have been in good company here today. Some old friends of yours were here. Admiral Kirby was here with us today. We had Martha Rhoades, and I think a couple of the folks that dropped through here, but we greatly appreciate you, sir, and we hope you have a great evening.
Well, thanks to you and everyone there, and all of you enjoy the evening. You've earned it.